Hello and welcome to Temple of Akasha, the home of embodied spirituality with me, Natasha. I'm joining you outside today because it's just too nice a day not to film outside. I have ditched my low quality microphone and headphone set because it picks up the wind really easily, so I hope you can hear me okay. So today's video is going to be discussing, exploring and investigating the power of presence, because as I've been reminded recently, presence really is a foundational principle. It's fundamental to our conscious awakening on this journey. And I want to explore within this video what presence is, how we cultivate it, where it sits within the dance of masculine and feminine embodiment, and how it is essential to our embodied awakening. So I hope this transmission serves. It has been a very potent and very powerful reminder for me to come back to pure presence, kind of at a day-to-day embodied level. And I have my mild concussion to thank for this reminder. So let's start there, shall we? Let's start with this mild concussion that I gave myself while I was camping in my van in Wales. And I did what I did last year whilst camping in my van. I hit my head on the chassis of my van, not just once, but 3 times within 48 hours. And so I think it was the force of the whack multiplied by the amount of times I whacked it and the time within, the time space within which I whacked it. It created quite an experience for me. I was really not very well. I was non-functional. I couldn't drive. I could barely eat. I could barely move. I couldn't walk. Anything other than lying in stillness was painful and very uncomfortable for quite a while. And so bringing presence to situations of discomfort is not a new process for me, but I did find myself in a lot of resistance to this concussion or this mild head injury experience. I found myself in a lot of resistance to the sensations that were arising. There was a lot of pain. There were a lot of, it really, I think it caused a little bit of issue. There was an issue with my neck and my back, and I think that was then creating some issues within my nervous system. And so there were a lot of physical, bodily discomforts to deal with, as well as the fact that it forced me to sit with all of the stories and all of the emotional content that perhaps I wouldn't have otherwise had the opportunity to witness. So it was a very powerful portal of experience for me, but there was resistance to witnessing the stories, witnessing the pain and sensations for most of that kind of recovery period, until the last night or one of the last nights of my last house sit. A friend of mine sent me a message and she said, have you thought about just sitting in presence with the concussion? And obviously I had been to some degree approaching this experience with that intention to sit with the present, to sit with the pain, to sit with the sensation. But her mirroring back that reflection to me made me realize that I hadn't been in pure presence with my experience. I had been present with my experience, but from a place of judgment in my embodiment. So I was actually, when I would sit down, for example, with the head pain, it would be with that embodied sense of, I'm sitting with this with the intention to try and fix it with my awareness, or I'm sitting with this pain and I'm angry at it. And so my embodiment is in contraction and I'm tense against this pain, right? I wasn't in a surrendered presence, we could say. I was in resistant presence, which we could argue is not really full presence. And so on that night, when my friend mirrored back that suggestion to me, I had just started my bleed as well, which also always gets me into a more surrendered place naturally. And so I decided to sit in bed and just be with the pain that was really throbbing at the top of my head where I hit it. And it was a powerful experience to really be in surrendered presence, where there is not where the body is not holding on to contraction or resistance against the experience, and you are no longer engaging any thoughts or stories about the experience. So there are no judgments at the bodily level or at the mind level. It's just pure presence. I was in that meditation, I think, for about 2 hours. I naturally then went to sleep. And what was interesting was that when I woke up, my concussion symptoms, especially the ones that I was experiencing in my head, the confusion, the dizziness, the pain, had all dissipated. And what was even more interesting was to be in that witnessing presence with the pain, or what I perceived as pain, and to actually just witness energy moving. When you are in presence with a sensation or an experience, what you will notice when you're not engaging in any other judgment and you are just being present with the experience, you will start to notice that everything is in a constant state of change and flux. Sorry, it's a bit windy. We are expecting a storm, so the winds may start picking up. I hope you can still hear me okay. I'm just going to crack on. So yeah, what you will notice is that energy is always in motion, and that partly inspired my video about impermanence. It really showed me how something that we can perceive to be solid, a pain, a sensation, an experience, when we're actually in witnessing, observer presence with it, is just energy. It's just the dynamic expression of life, and it's changing, and it isn't permanent. And it is in a state of transformation always. And what I found is that our non-judgmental presence has the power to, I don't want to say prompt the change to happen more quickly, but the presence bring, where attention goes, energy flows. So when we bring this loving presence to our experience, it does assist healing. It does assist returning to wholeness, because we're not in resistance to any part of our experience. And this is essential. This is the essential element. I'd been in resistance, right, to some degree, unconsciously, to this pain. What came through that evening when I sat with the pain in presence was that when we are meeting uncomfortable experiences, it's very helpful to approach that experience with the embodied intention. How would love hold this? If you go into an experience and you're going into it like you're about to fight a war, you are still in some degree of separation with that experience. Love is the singularity. It is the nature of consciousness, unconditional love. And so when we meet an uncomfortable experience with the embodied intention to love instead of judge, that's where the true healing and transformation happens. So if you are going through a difficult experience, or if you are meeting internal or external challenges, I invite you to bring the embodied intention. How would love hold this? And what I mean by the embodied intention is to actually, when you sit down in presence, and we'll do, in my next video, I'll do a guided experience of this, but when you sit in presence and when you're in your experience, just notice if you're holding tension towards it, notice if you're in contraction, and start to embody what love feels like. So maybe you think of a person or a place or something that you love, you notice how that softens you. It's that same degree of softness and tenderness and compassion that we must bring to our own experience. That's what I mean by that embodied approach of love. It's a softness, it's an openness, it's an invitation that says, I'm here to hold all of you, regardless of how you present or feel or think. It's just a loving presence. That is the nature of unconditional love. There are no conditions to that love. And so that's the first point. Presence with the embodied intention of love is a powerful combination for healing. So as I've already mentioned, presence to me is foundational and fundamental to our awakening journey. It was the first thing that I learned as I began this process in 2015. I was living in Vietnam, in Hanoi, and I met my soon-to-be partner of the time out there, and he gave me, the first present he ever gave me was Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth. And that book, I feel, really marked the beginning of this conscious awakening process for me. And so the first few years of my journey were really focused on presence, cultivation, mindfulness, meditation, and ego awareness. And I see now, looking back at the arc of my journey, how much that served me. Because presence, our ability to be present, our ability to be here now, which is what presence means. It means our ability to be in contact with the present moment without engaging in a flurry of content of the mind, without being lost in stories, without getting hooked on judgments, without getting caught in narratives or ideas. Presence is our ability to just be in this now moment, and also, crucially, to be able to observe the mind and not let it enslave us, not let the momentum of the mind drive our experience. So to be really aware of the mind, which is where mindfulness comes in. And so when I was beginning my awakening journey, I started here, and I realize now that presence is an innately masculine principle. When we're talking about inner union of the masculine and feminine principles, the yin and yang, Shakti and Shiva, we're talking about presence being masculine as a principle. So if we relate this to yogic philosophy, the Kundalini Shakti is an innately feminine principle, the serpent, that snake energy that rises from the base of the spine in dynamic energetic motion to meet Shiva at the crown, consciousness. Energy and consciousness. Energy is the dynamism of life, its flow, it's feminine in its quality. Consciousness is the container that holds all potential. And so the words that came through for me when I was downloading this video transmission to share with you were, without the marriage of these two principles, each principle cannot manifest its full potential. Consciousness would remain as pure potential, but when infused with energy, becomes actualized possibility. And so when we're talking about inner union, our ability to be present is the foundation. It creates the safe container to hold all of our human experience. It's consciousness at the crown, right? Our ability to be connected to the all, the I am consciousness, the oneness, the singularity. So it's our connection to true nature that then holds this human experience, which manifests as feelings, as emotions, as sensual experiences, right? It manifests through the body. Eros, which is innately a feminine principle, this kind of expressed quality. And so our presence, our ability to be present, our ability to observe the mind is masculine, in that when we are awakening, it allows us to hold the duality of this human experience and not get caught in it, and not get lost in it, and not become identified with it, and to not become marred by Maya, the illusion of duality, the illusion of separation, and to remain in contact with our true nature, which is as expressions of the singularity, expressions of consciousness. And so this marriage of the two, of our ability to both be present, masculine, our presence holds the container, then allows us to feel safe to express what it is that we're feeling, what it is that wants to move through us, what it is that wants to be animated in the world, the feminine. And this is a beautiful and essential marriage for our awakening. So I really want to stress presence as a foundational principle for awakening. If you're just beginning your journey, if you've just found me, or you're still, moving through lots of content and don't really know where to start, I strongly advise starting with cultivating a presence practice. And so let's just touch on how we do that. There are two primary ways that we cultivate presence. The first and most probably well-known way is through meditation. So what that means is we actively choose to sit and cultivate the ability to observe the mind, to be able to see clearly the thoughts we're thinking, like clouds in the sky passing, rather than as these commanding directives that we have to follow. When we're fully identified with the mind, it is the command center that we take to be truth. And that's not the case. What the mind produces when it's just doing what it does and thinking, those expressions are not truth. And so it's very important that we have the ability to witness the content of the mind so that we don't get lost in illusion. And so meditation, whether that's just sitting and watching the flow of breath, whether that's sitting and focusing on a mantra, whether that's sitting and scanning the body through a body scan, whether that is sitting with mudras engaged, which helps to activate certain mudras activate concentration. However we choose to meditate, the process of meditation invites us to create a focused container where we dedicate ourselves to coming back to presence, coming back to the beingness, noticing when we fall into thought and then coming back. I always describe mind training and cultivating presence like training a puppy. When you first get a puppy, that puppy goes all over the place, right? And it takes so much reinforcement for that puppy to come back on command, to sit when you ask it to sit, to, give you a paw if you want it to give you a paw. It takes time for the erratic nature of a puppy, and likewise with a mind that has not been trained, it takes time for it to become more settled. And so when you're first starting this process, you may find that your mind, you are constantly thinking and then having to remind yourself, oh, I'm in meditation. I have got to come back to presence. That's okay. That's natural. Lots of people say they're bad at meditating when they do that. No, the mind is designed to think. If you are thinking thoughts and you notice you're thinking thoughts, fantastic. You're already developing and cultivating awareness. The process gets easier the more you do it. Just because you don't have an entirely empty mind when you first sit down to meditate doesn't mean you're bad at meditating. It doesn't mean that you should stop meditating. The first process when you're doing this is always just beginning to notice, oh, I was thinking, not judging that, not starting to, reprimand yourself for thinking, just coming back to presence. Okay, you get lost in thought, come back to presence. You get lost in thought, come back to presence. It's that process over and over and over again. So meditation helps us to create conditions where we're really focused on cultivating presence. And I would say the second most well-known process, and I would say arguably even more powerful than just focused meditation, is mindfulness, which is the process of, in your day-to-day experience, choosing to be present. So just as we do in meditation, we sit and we observe the mind. When we're moving through our lived experience, we also have the potential to witness and observe the mind and to come back to presence. Now, it is somewhat easier in a meditation container because all of your focus is placed on just observing the mind. With your eyes open and moving through your embodied human experience, there are lots of sensory there's lots of sensory stimulation that could begin to spark, mental chatter, which could evoke an emotion, which then, you might judge and you can spiral in that way. it gets more difficult to cultivate presence in our day-to-day lives, but when you do, that's when you start to notice real transformation in your experience. When you start to move through this human experience with presence, that's when you start to really be able to embody your spacious nature as energy, as spirit in matter. So I would say that if you're just starting this journey, or you want to come back to basics, which is what I consider presence as, it's our fundamental basic element of this journey, start with your presence practice in your day-to-day experience. Start with mindfulness, doing your daily tasks, chopping your vegetables for your dinner, brushing your teeth, making your bed, feeding your animal, gardening, whatever it is that you have to do. Driving's a big one. They say that alcohol kills. They say that texting kills on the road. None of those things kill. What kills is a lack of conscious awareness. When a person is texting, they're not being present with the driving experience. When a person is drunk, they're not able to be present because their consciousness is fragmented and they're slightly disembodied. When you drink, the consciousness is not fully anchored in the body. So it's not any external factor that causes a person to be dangerous on the road. It's a lack of ability to be present. And so actually presence is fundamental to me to shifting us as a humanity into the next level of our awakening. And so cultivating presence to me is where I get clients to start if they're working with me long term. It's where I would suggest anyone that came to me would start if they're just starting their journey. And it's where we must continue to cultivate presence, because the deeper we dive into our human content, the subconscious, especially if you're on a Kundalini awakening, the purification of the subconscious happens naturally, right? That's what Kundalini is doing. She is purifying us of that false self-content, and it's usually it all is accumulated in the subconscious. So when we are diving deeper into this territory of embodiment, of feeling more deeply, of witnessing deeper trauma, of witnessing more gnarly stories, we also have to have an expanded container to hold that. So if you do not continue a presence practice and you're focusing solely on that feminine principle of feeling and being with your embodied experience, and you're not able to be present, you will loop in stories. You will loop by getting fixated on feeling and creating judgments about that feeling. Your presence helps you to be able to hold that feeling, hold that emotional experience, hold whatever it is that's in your nervous system without getting lost in it, without it sucking you back into that past self or that past experience, and then staying there in the now. So I can't stress enough the power and importance of presence. I hope this has been a helpful introduction / reminder of the power and importance of presence in our lives. My next video, I've been guided to create a very short chakra presence meditation. So I will lead you through a process where we just observe these energy centers and that have parts of the physical body which they govern. And so I look forward to creating that, and I look forward to guiding you through that. If you've got any questions about this, I would welcome them in the comments as always. Any questions, comments, feedback is always welcome on this channel, because really I'm creating to serve. This is a space of service for me. It's also a creative outlet for me. I love creating on YouTube, but fundamentally I'm here to serve. So if you do have questions, inquiries, comments, it really helps me to direct my energy and to know where it's most needed. Thank you for that in advance. I would also encourage you to like, share and subscribe if you haven't already done so. It really helps the right people find my content. I look forward to connecting with you again in presence in our next experience.